All right, guys, so now we're going to go ahead and do our interview with director and co-writer Matthew T. Price. He's going to be talking about a little bit of the controversy that he's experienced with Amazon Prime. But it's an interesting subject, so you should definitely check it out. Hey everyone, today we have a special guest who came to talk about his movie, Other Halves, which he is the director and co-writer for, and there's actually been a little bit of controversy around this. So I want to welcome you, Matthew T. Price. Welcome to Beyond the Void Horror Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
I don't want to jump right into the meat and potatoes of why we met up and how we met up on Reddit and everything like that. But can you give our listeners just an understanding of what the movie's about and why you made it?
Yeah. Other Halves is, we always saw it as a modern day Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde story. Part of our initial, that was part of our original idea, was that Stephen King has written about how there's three basic monsters. There's a vampire, there's a unkillable monster, and there's the werewolf, the internal monster. And the classic version of all of these is Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, who isn't specifically a werewolf, but it's the same idea where you are the monster. But in our early drafts, the movie was actually about these college kids that were like working on a science experiment in a lab. It just sort of felt like an 18th century idea or 19th century idea. We sort of racked our brains, and then we came up with an app. Because we have both Kelly and I, who I wrote the movie, Kelly Moore, I should say, we wrote the movie together. We both have a lot of friends who are in the startup world. And we suddenly sort of landed on this idea of what if an app did something to you where it sort of let you be who you really are and unleashed your id. And so the plot of the movie is basically it's a group of programmers who have created a dating app that when you use it goes through all of your, internet history, all of your browsing and your comments and things like that. And it uses that information to pair you up with somebody who has similar interests rather than like you filling out a form or something like that. And the idea was that the app actually shows you all of that stuff in rapid succession. So it shows you not your own perception of yourself, but it shows you what you actually do and what you're actually interested in. Triggers something in your brain and lets you just do that without trying to be nice and polite for society. And so this bug happens, and they have to sort of decide, are we going to shut it down or do we let it go because maybe this is a good thing that people are sort of letting loose? Well, and it's a horror movie, so, there are people who end up, their id tells them to murder people, and other people, their id tells them to go around fucking. And, it's... There's different responses that different people have because everybody sort of has their own different internal drive. So it's kind of an exploration of what you really are versus the way you present yourself. That being said, it's a horror movie. There's scary scenes. There's some nudity. There's all of the things that you sort of want from a horror movie. But we tried to put a little bit of we didn't want to be the sort of stereotypical lazy writers of horror movies. We wanted to be at the higher level of some of the best horror movies out there. Whether we succeeded at that or not is kind of up to the audience to decide, but at least we were trying.
No, I really liked the concept of it a lot. I actually thought, because it kind of lowers your inhibitions, and you end up doing things that you probably normally wouldn't, almost like as if you were drinking alcohol or doing anything else to lower your inhibitions. So it just kind of brings this whole side of you forward. So I really love that aspect. I'll be honest, in the very beginning, it was a little slow for me. But by the middle, it kicked off, and I was just, like, anxious. Like, I wanted to smoke a cigarette while I was watching it.
If I'm being perfectly honest, and the movie's been out for a while, so I can be, we kind of feel the same way. Like, if I started over, I would work on that a little bit. It is my first movie as a director. It's Kelly and I's first feature-length script that was actually produced. Our other producer, Kurt Chatham, it was his first feature as a producer. So, like, I think the audience should watch it as a movie. But, like, from my own perspective, I kind of graded on a curve as being, it is our first movie. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of time. But I agree. Sometimes if somebody wants to fast forward to the like halfway point, it might be a little it's a little more exciting in the second half than in the first half. And
it has context.
I can be honest about that. That's true.
It has context, so it's not like it's just obligatory or anything. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really like the concept of it, and it stirred up, like I was telling you before we started. It started a little bit of a debate between me and my girlfriend a little bit about why the nudity scenes were in there, and I was trying to explain to her. I was like, well, if your inhibitions are lowered and this is this side of you that no one sees, then sex, all this other stuff will be coming out. So it's almost like, I mean, maybe you can explain it to me, and I want to ruin it for anybody, but there was a scene in the shower where the two girls were naked in the whole thing, and she felt that it was a little unbelievable at that point. I threw a bunch of different things out there. Is there a reason why you put that in there, the scene?
There was a lot of reasons. You sort of touched on one of the core things, which was we felt that the fictional app is a dating app, and it is about your id and sort of your basic instincts. We felt like it would be dishonest if we tried to make it clean in a sexual way. It wouldn't be correct. But on the other hand, we also didn't want to do sort of the really obvious standard things. So for instance, in a lot of horror movies, there's a hot girl who takes off her shirt and then gets stabbed. Well, in our movie, we have a really hot guy who takes off his shirt and then gets stabbed. And so we sort of played with those things. So the shower scene was, okay, this is a thing that happens in horror movies. There's two girls that are taking a shower. But we didn't film it like, for instance, in Slumber Party Massacre, there's a shower scene, and you watch that, and the camera is sliding up and down the girls' bodies. And it's like, hey, look at their ass, hey, look at their face. And whatever they're talking about kind of has nothing to do with anything. It's like teenage girls talking, you know? It couldn't be less interesting. It's clearly there just to show.
Yeah.
So we kind of went for the opposite. It is two characters. It is the scene where the app is explained. Like, that information of how the app is supposed to work is exposition that needed to be in the movie somewhere. So we said, okay, we're going to put that in the scene where the two girls are naked. And we're going to shoot it like it's a dialogue scene where, you know, there's close-ups and medium shots, but we're never going to zoom in on their body parts. And this is how we presented it to the actresses when we were in the casting process. We said, it'll look like a regular dialogue scene, but you're just going to be naked during it. A lot of people have sort of said that whole thing about, hey, I don't really believe that they would hop in the shower together because they're coworkers. Right. I mean, maybe, again, this is maybe like our, you know, first attempt sort of mistake, but like our thought was, when you work really long hours, when you're in the gym, you do shower with other people in the gym. Like, that's shouldn't be a big deal. And like, part of the point was to show that this is how comfortable they are with each other, that they can both take a shower and be fine with it. I've worked, and Kelly has worked in places of business where there is a gym and there is a shower. You might run into your boss there. Right. I mean, we knew it was obviously a stretch. It was still a thing that we put in there specifically to hit those points while undermining them at the same time. We didn't think it was that crazy, and I think maybe we just didn't set it up well enough for some people. But if you go back and look at it, like, yes, they're naked, but the camera never dwells on their nakedness.
I kind of wanted to preface it with that because it was interesting to me that part of the reason that we met was because of another scene in the movie, and this was the scene that me and my girlfriend were debating.
It's a little bit complicated, and I don't think anyone will ever sort of fully 100% know the entire story. There's a lot of game of telephone because I'm a filmmaker. I don't just give the movie to the retailer, which is Amazon or, you know, iTunes or whatever. Like, we have to go through a distributor, and all of our information comes back through that distributor who's an intermediary. So if someone wants to say that this story is inaccurate, this is the most accurate that I'm aware of. Right. So the very beginning of the film is a character wakes up. She's clearly in a strange place. She's lying on the floor and she has no idea where she is. And then we cut to a wide shot and we realize that not only is she lying on the floor, but she's completely naked and she's covered in blood. And then we cut to an even wider shot and we see there's a man lying next to her who's completely naked and his throat has been ripped out. And then she just sort of looks off into space and goes, fuck, like she's done this before, and then proceeds to start cleaning up like wiping her fingerprints off of everything in this apartment and like picking out hairs from the bed sheets and things like that. Like she's forensically cleaning up after herself. And she's
Bleaching
clearly
everything. So
she's clearly done this a lot. And that was the setup. In fact, that was literally the first idea of the movie was waking up in a strange place and realizing that you've killed somebody and you've done this before. So you just go through the step-by-step simple, exact process to make sure you don't get caught.
Right.
That was one of the very earliest ideas that we had. Again, with the idea of playing with tropes, yes, we've got a naked woman, but she's covered in blood, so it's not exactly sexy. Right. And then we're also going to show a man who's completely naked because equality, right? Like, right. If we're going to show her, we're going to show him. Like, that was an important part of how that worked. And now the audience, it generally isn't used to seeing a man's penis. So right. There's a little bit of a shock value there, as well as the fact that he's dead and they've obviously just had sex. Like, at least you can sort of assume that they've just had sex without actually having to show it. We're talking 2 shots that are 7 seconds total.
It really just went by like nothing. And I didn't even think anything of it when I saw it. I was like, that must be the one.
Right. Just the way that it's lit and the position of the guy, and it's not like he's got an erection or anything. You only know that it's there because he's obviously naked and human anatomy. But like, it's not like it stands out. It's not like we have a close-up on it. It's a wide shot where you're seeing 2 full-bodied people. And just sort of depending on your sexual interests, you may not even look there because
I didn't even find it distasteful or anything like that. But it's interesting that male genitalia is a big no-no. But female, perfectly fine. And so this was part of the original vision of the movie, and we executed it. And this is, everybody from the actress who's Mercedes Manning, who's a very good actress and a very smart woman, and we had long discussions about all of the various elements of this movie. And she's very self-conscious of women's rights and very interested in what we were doing about trying to make things equal. She liked the scene and was interested in obviously in being in it. She was very cognizant of what the scene was and what it meant, and we had long discussions about that scene. And she's also in the shower scene, and then later on there's a scene where she has sex with a guy and then stabs him, because she's literally exposing herself, but also sort of in a metaphorical way. And she wanted to make sure that we were taking care about the way it was presenting and that it actually meant something and that it was intentional. Kelly, the co-writer and producer, obviously had a lot of thoughts about how we were going to be filming it and what it, why it was there. And, of course I did. I didn't want anything to just be like, we didn't want to just throw in exploitation for no good reason. Right.
There was lots of thoughts and discussions on this. So it was all very intentional. It was all well thought out ahead of time. So we submitted the film through our distributor to iTunes and Amazon and various other Google Play and Vudu. It got out there. But the problem with Amazon was it was technically available on Amazon. But if you searched for other halves, even if you searched within Amazon Video and searched for other halves, it wouldn't show up in the search. There'd be a tiny little line that said something along the lines of hiding adult content, click here to see all results. Something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what the phrasing was. And the distributor told us that it was on Amazon, and I was very excited that like, hey, my movie's out there. I couldn't find it because this line was a very tiny line. It's not even a thing that I even knew existed. It's not like there was a large button that said, hey, this is for adults only. It was crazy. Like it was really, really hard to find, and it wouldn't show up. I would tell friends and family, and they would get back to me, and they would be like, are you sure it's still on Amazon? Because I can't find it.
Referring to Prime.
So yes. Well, at first it was only pay. You had to buy or rent it.
Okay.
And then it was on Prime because you want to have the rentals and the streaming fees first, and then you switch it to Prime.
Right.
So in both cases, it wasn't showing up in searches unless you clicked this extra button. We didn't know why. At first, the distributor suggested just cutting all of the nudity, and I was like, again, that shower scene is like centrally important to the plot, but you literally can't cut that scene because it sets up there's a whole stalker subplot going on. We can't remove the nudity. That doesn't even. Plus, we all know there's plenty of movies on Prime that have nudity. So like, what's the issue? So it took a little while to sort of figure it out, and ultimately, what we drilled down to was. It was the man's penis in that opening scene that got them bothered. My whole thing was there's a naked woman there as well. You're seeing both of them lying next to each other. It's perfectly equal, and yet the problem is the man and not the woman. And I couldn't wrap my head around that, but we sent it back to the editor, and he had to do a little bit of messing around with the music cues, and he pulled out literally 7 seconds out of the film. And I know this because we had to redo the subtitles too by exactly 7 seconds.
Sure.
We re-uploaded it to Prime, and immediately it was available to everybody everywhere. So Amazon has no problems with a 3.5 minute shower scene. There's a character gets scalped, and you can see her brain. That's fine. There's multiple stabbings. There's several other instances of nudity throughout the film of a couple of different actresses. All of those things were, I guess, fine. But the penis shot put it behind a barrier that nobody could stumble upon the movie. And so for a little film like us, who we don't have a marketing budget, we don't have any sort of connections, it's just Twitter and Facebook and then telling everybody that we know.
Right.
And that's all that we had. That was the only way we could get the word out. If enough people review the movie and give it, 4 or 5 stars and say and actually write like a 3-sentence review that says, hey, it's really great and scary or whatever, then Amazon starts recommending it to other people. But that never happens because nobody will accidentally find our movie, never stumble across it. They'll never just search for killer app horror movie and Other Halves will just pop up on that list.
Right.
It's just, there's no way to stumble across it. You had to either search for it and then know that there was a second link to click, which like a second click is the worst thing you can do. So you either had to search for it and click a second time and know that you had to do that, or you had to have the actual specific exact link. There was no stumbling upon this movie. And that cost money. And honestly, it also cost, not that Amazon gives a crap, but like it cost Amazon money. They're not getting their however much money they make off of every time somebody rents or buys the movie. There wasn't anywhere in their sort of rules or terms of service or anything that specifically said, hey, no penis. There's things on there where they say no explicit sex, no pornographic material, and I can't remember the exact wording. The characters were lying next to each other. They weren't even touching. So there's nothing sexual going. There's sex implied in the past, but like there's nothing sexual going on there. Again, I've been on Amazon. I've seen movies that have a lot more explicit stuff. It's just you're not explicitly seeing a penis, and somehow that's the line, apparently.
Right. And you know what? I actually believe, and I'm not 100% here, but I believe Lars von Trier's Antichrist was on Prime. And if you've ever seen that movie, that is explicit. Like, so it makes me wonder, was it just one person complaining and they had to try to honor it?
It wasn't a complaint because we never got up there it's not like we were up there normally and then something happened. Like this was the way it was from the beginning on Amazon. So it was definitely an internal decision by Amazon. I believe you're right about Antichrist, and I think there's a few other movies on that long Reddit thread where a couple of people brought up, hey, what about this other movie with Dick? But in almost every case, the general public has this idea of there's large budget movies that are like the Marvel and Star Wars movies, and then there's small budget movies like Antichrist. That Antichrist had Willem Dafoe in it. It's not a small budget. It was still multiple millions of dollars. It's small on the scale of studios. Our movie cost $50,000.
Right.
And we didn't have any of that stuff. I love our cast, and I think they're great. And hopefully they think I'm they liked working with me as a director. But like we all know, none of us are famous or any sort of draw, at least yet. I feel like that was part of it too, is that we're on a different scale, like they're counting it differently. And we're a horror movie, not an artsy awards type of movie like Shame, for instance. I don't know if that was on Prime, but like that was obviously awards bait and was going to get nominated for Oscars and BAFTAs and whatever.
Sure.
Or at least that's what they were trying for. It was that type of movie. We are not that type of movie, and so somehow that means we get graded on a different scale, which doesn't seem fair. But the worst part was that we didn't get any warning, and we, the filmmakers, were given instructions from the distributor. I don't 100% know if Amazon specifically said, hey, remove this, or if the distributor had to like figure it out based on like their own experiences.
Right. Well, and if there is some sort of grading or, rules, like lay them out so people can know. Kind of seems like a stumbling point for them to, I don't know. I mean, it may not be big to them and the bigger scheme, but to everybody else trying to come up and make movies and make art, It does seem highly unfair to me. I don't know. It just seems weird. Even there's a new movie. I was talking to a buddy of mine that just came out, Our Cure for Wellness.
Yeah.
In that scene, there was a lot of man ass, for the lack of better words. There was a lot of naked females. In any of the scenes where there could be male genitalia, they had the front part, they had these white, tighty-whities sort of pants while they're floating in these tubes. So it makes you kind of wonder, like, if there is an unspoken rule.
In order to get a rating on your movie, an R or an NC-17 or whatever, you have to submit it to the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, and you have to pay them several $1,000s. I don't know what it is, but like, since our budget was $50,000, it would have been a huge percentage of our budget. So like, we were never gonna even try for a rating. We knew we weren't going to be in theaters. We never were sort of concerned about like playing in a big theater and that sort of like limitation. We didn't think there was going to be any limitation on the internet. You know? Whenever I see scenes like that in a movie, it always bothers me and it always takes me out. It's like, I'm now thinking about the filmmaking process. Instead of thinking about how creepy it is that there's people floating in tanks, instead I'm thinking about the fact that you felt the need to cover up a guy's junk.
Exactly. Yeah, it takes you out of it a little bit.
Then I'm thinking about the actor and not the character. Horror movies specifically, there's a reason why there's a lot of sex in a lot of horror movies, because it's a very sort of primal instinct, and there's a lot of, especially like with the teenage stuff, there's a lot of fear and unknown going on at the same time as the sex, and things can go wrong, and sex can be dangerous, and you want to be able to address those things in horror, if nothing else. And when I see a horror movie that is explicitly about sex, like the point is to talk about sex, and then they don't have nudity, or like the lead actress isn't naked, it brings me out of it, because I'm thinking about, she had it in her contract that you're not gonna, like, for instance, I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but like, It Follows was obviously a metaphor for sexually transmitted diseases, and the movie's all about sex. It was weird that the main character has sex 3 or 4 times, and you never once see anything. It took me out of the movie because I'm like, okay, she has a no nudity clause in her contract. Like,
right.
I can't believe that it was the filmmaker's intention to not have her be naked. I think they liked her as an actress, and she was the right level of name for the movie to get the marketing and the budget. And so I feel like they must have, maybe, I mean, I don't know, I could be wrong, but it seems like a compromise to me. Right. In our case, we found the final girl, Lauren Lakis, and the lead villain, Mercedes Manning. They were both great, and they were great for the part, but we also said you have to be okay with the nudity, because that's what this movie is. It's a movie about dating. It's a movie about sex, on top of a bunch of other things. And they understood that there was a point to it, and we were doing it on purpose, and they were okay with that.
Especially with the concept to it. I mean, it made sense to me by the end of the movie, 100%. Because I believe even the Mercedes, is that how you say it? I apologize. Mercedes. So at the end, well, I don't want to spoil it, but I'm just saying there was a scene with the 2 main actresses. It seemed like there was a little bit of a same-sex thing, a tone to it, in a way. Am I wrong about that, or?
We sort of saw that in the edit. It wasn't necessarily a thing that we wanted to put in there, but it also wasn't something we wanted to avoid. Like it's because of the fact that it sort of came out in the performance and in the edit that it felt natural.
Okay.
But it wasn't
deliberate, like,
it wasn't as deliberate as some of the other things, but again, like, the fact that came out naturally in the context of the story with those characters, it's not surprising, Right. And I think if we had done things differently, you wouldn't get those sort of natural thoughts and discussions about sex if we didn't present it honestly that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, it made sense. It didn't seem like anything that you did, especially that scene, the male genitalia scene. It just doesn't make any sense to me why that. And maybe it was just at the beginning, and it was just such a part.
Right there,
yeah,
right at the top. I had said, like, when we were shooting and like even in like the development stage, I was like, this is going to be the shot that people are going to talk about. Like, this is the thing that'll like stick with you for the rest of the movie, and it'll set the tone. And what we were talking about earlier about maybe the beginning being a little bit slow, we honestly thought that opening scene with 2 naked people covered in blood would sort of give us 20 minutes of, we don't actually have to do a specific horror scene. we were hoping that would sort of carry us, and maybe that was miscalculation on our part.
I didn't think it took me out of it too much.
Yeah.
I mean, for your first movie, I think it was really good. So, I mean, and when it kicks in, it really kind of put me on the edge of my seat a little bit, you know? And I love the fast cuts, the weird things that were happening in it. It really actually got me. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing what you do next. Now, do you want to stay within this horror genre, or are you going to kind of go elsewhere?
I really like horror. I've always been a fan. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. I've not always been a fan, although I'm actually old enough that I've been a fan for longer than I haven't been. If you really want to get into like my personal story,
sure.
This might end up being boring. You might just cut the whole thing. But when I was about 4 years old, my dad had a heart attack. He was a smoker. He smoked like 2 packs a day or whatever. He was playing basketball with my older sister and just collapsed in our driveway.
Wow.
And had to be taken off to the hospital, and he survived, and is still alive today. He's fine. He quit smoking. They asked him if he was a smoker, and he said no. And they said, have you ever been a smoker? And he said yes. And they said, when did you quit? And he said 15 minutes ago. And he's literally never smoked since. But like, I'm 4 years old, and I see my dad collapse, and then a few hours later, I saw him in the hospital, and he's hooked up to tubes, and not like, it is obviously very weak and stuff. And this is like, psychologists tell you, like, your dad is your model for God, and I'm seeing him laid flat out, and it was pretty bad. My mom wanted some time alone with him, and so my older sister actually could drive at that point. So she told my older sister to take all of us kids, there was 5 of us, I was the youngest, to the movies to just sort of get our minds off of it, and so she could spend some time alone. And at the time, we needed to find a movie that little 4-year-old Matt could go see. And there was a movie with cute little furry things running around, and it looked adorable, and that looked like a good children's movie to take Matt to. Well, what they didn't tell you was that those cute little furry things turned into horrible green gremlins. And that was...
That's funny.
And I know now that movie is supposed to be a comedy, but like 4-year-old me who had just seen my dad have a heart attack, that movie was terrifying.
Yes.
Because especially this, I was.
And the scene where they're in the pods, and music and the like cat noises, like that always freaked me out.
Scary shit in Gremlins. Even if there's some dark humor in it, there's a lot of scary stuff too.
Right.
And so that traumatized me, and I didn't watch a horror movie for years. Like I wasn't into it, like a lot of people get into it when they're younger, like start reading like the comics or something, and then they start sneaking in to watch the movies with their older siblings, stuff like that. I never did that. But when I was 16, there was a girl I had a crush on in high school, and she really liked the movie Scream. So in order to spend time with this girl, I watched the movie Scream with her. And I don't remember her name anymore. Like this was decades ago, but Scream made a big impression on me because it was the first time that I ever thought about movies being made. Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I know that someone made the movie, but like I never thought about the process. But that movie was so self-reflective and talked about like the history of movies, and like there's all these movies that they talk about, like I never even heard of I Spit on Your Grave, things like that. So I started to consume all of these movies that I had missed like all at once. And then I went to film school, and then I started working in Hollywood as a PA and a camera assistant and that kind of thing. My filmmaking brain was formed on horror movies. And so I've done a lot of different things. Like I've written comedies, and there's a web series. The guy in Other Halves, Carson Nicely, he's in a web series romantic comedy that I co-wrote and directed. And
really?
It's funny and it's goofy and it's nothing scary about it even remotely. But I always come back to horror. As a director, I think it's the genre that most depends on having a good director or the right director. Like a lot of comedy, the writing is important and the acting is important. Director's not so much. Like the director can screw it up, but like you point the camera at the people saying funny things, like the stuff that you were talking about with Other Halves towards the end of the film, the pacing and the framing of the shots and the build and tension, like there's a lot of people that are involved in that. Toby Demmel's cinematography was fantastic, and Don Stroud's editing was very precise, and Eric Delagua's music was amazing. Like there's a lot of really good. I love the theme that he has, and the way our sound designer Chris Henry mixed the sound effects with music so that they're sort of one piece. All of those things are important, but it's sort of the director's job to take those dozens of people and push them together into one piece. It's the coordinating of all of those things to make the tension work that's the director's job. And other movies rely less on that. I mean, who knows what the future will bring, but like I think I'll definitely stick around with horror movies for a while because of that.
Do you have an idea of something that you would kind of lean towards, or maybe a director that you kind of look up to?
Sam Raimi was my first
Sure.
love, because I'm from Michigan, and there's actually a line in Army of Darkness where he says, referring to the shotgun, he says, "The sweet baby was made in Grand Rapids, Michigan," which is where I'm from. My high school friends and I, we'd sit around, we'd watch Army of Darkness every other weekend, and we always cheered at that line. It was very it was very particular to us. And even though the original Evil Dead was shot in, I want to say like Tennessee, like it still had like a Midwest vibe, and like his aesthetic was. Even when he went on to make the huge, movies like Spider-Man and stuff, like he kept his anarchic style. So I've always been a fan of. But on the other end of that is David Fincher, who is a very precise, very specific. Every shot has to be just so. Like he has a really famous quote that people like to bring up. He says, "A lot of people will tell you that there's a million ways to shoot a scene. I don't think that's true. There's 2 maybe, and one of them is wrong."
That's pretty good.
Every shot is there on purpose. Like I said, I used to work as crew on a bunch of movies and television shows and stuff, and I've seen directors who show up on set and are like, "Okay, what are we shooting today?" And it's, for the crew, it's terrible because that's just a hard day if the director doesn't know what he's doing. But also, like, the end product just ends up being this sort of mushy nothingness. So in my preparation for Other Halves, I created a shot list and a floor plan which showed the blocking for the actors as well as like the camera location for every single shot of the movie, because the whole movie was shot in 10 days. In order to get that, we shot 3 cameras all the time. So I had to figure out in advance where those 3 cameras going to be for each setup, very specific planning. We were able to get more shots, and we were like make a shot worth 2 or 3 different shots because of the way the actors were moving around very, intentionally and specifically. And that came from a lot of that came from David Fincher's very specific, well thought out. Now, he doesn't shoot with 2 cameras, let alone 3, because he wants every shot to be exactly right.
Right.
But like, I didn't have the time for that. He's a goddamn lunatic because he does 70 takes and whatever. But I don't think we did more than 3 takes on anything.
I think you're on point with that. So I'm definitely looking forward to see what you do next. Maybe it'll be a thriller. Maybe it'll be a horror. I mean, I think they're pretty close to one another.
Thriller is what you call a horror movie when it puts on its like coat and tie. Like,
right. That's
it's
true.
when you want to be fan. Like you can't win an Oscar if it's a horror movie, but you can win it if it's thriller. Like somehow Silence of the Lambs isn't a horror movie, even though the main character eats people. Yeah. That's not a horror movie, guys. Sure.
Well, I thank you very, very much for your time, man.
Thank you for having me.
It's been fun hanging out and talking to you about this, and I hope, it sucks that the 7 seconds has been taken out.
Yeah, I mean, you can find the full version on iTunes and Google Play, and I think it's actually still buried on Amazon, but it doesn't show up on Amazon Prime. So I know people prefer streaming because you've already paid for Prime, so you want to watch it on Prime rather than spend the $2 or $5. And I can totally, I'm on a budget as much as anybody else, and so like I can totally appreciate that. But if you want to support indie horror and you want to see the movie we intended, I would recommend iTunes or Google Play. But if you already have Amazon Prime, it's still, you lose a little bit, but it's not like it ruins the movie.
Right. Guys, if you get a chance, please check that out. Be good to see what your thoughts are on it, guys. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate it. I wish you the best of luck and the future for doing another movie.
Cool. Thanks very much.
All right, so that was our interview with Matthew T. Price. First of all, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. Definitely was nice talking with you, and thank you so much for coming on, man. As far as male genitalia goes in movies, like, how do you feel about that? Like, honestly.
It's